we see people working in teams. They may be co-located or they may be working virtually, but the teams are expected to produce. And whether you're a member of a defined work group or whether you're an individual contributor, your performance matters. And a huge part of performing is being held accountable. Thus, today's webinar is about the whole enchilada, not just focusing on you or me, but on the organization as well, and how to build accountable organizations. And yeah, it's pretty much a hot topic. Why so? There's a lot of evidence out there that a lack of systemic accountability is really costing corporate America. Tens of billions of dollars a year, in fact, in terms of rework, return of defective products, loss of government contracts, inefficiency, sometimes workplace conflicts, huge misunderstandings, and sadly, even employee theft. So billions in income is lost by companies who lose formerly loyal customers because of a lack of accountability that oftentimes results in substandard to poor customer service norms. Now, I'll grant you that developing and sustaining accountability is hard today. You have people spread all over the globe. You have the challenge of 24/7 news cycles and 24/7 accessibility by mobile devices. You have differences in leadership styles and behaviors. Goodness knows there's ever-changing technologies that some of us have a hard time keeping up with sometimes. And you have new generations of mobile, self-reliant, and independent employees who really prefer to work alone as much as possible. That's not an easy environment in which to sustain any kind of organizational culture, much less one that fosters accountability as a standard business practice. So what is it? This is one definition that I particularly like. Let you read it. And you know, accountability is not always an inspiring topic. So I'm really pleased that all of you signed up for our webinar. It's a word we hear and we know it's good for us, but it's kind of like going to the dentist for a root canal. We assume it's going to hurt or to be uncomfortable at best. But the truth is, accountability is absolutely unavoidable. It's here to stay. In the workplace, everyone is accountable to someone. In a traditional organization, hey, workers are individually accountable to their respective bosses. In a high-performance organization, team members are individually accountable to each other and mutually accountable to their customers. That's a little different playing field. Now, just the mention of it makes some people cringe, obviously these two. Bosses, employees, we all cringe. And there's that painful dread of yet another job evaluation or assessment that threatens to steal time and energy from what should be the productive contributions you're supposed to be providing each and every day. But guess what? Despite the negative connotations people have about it, inspiring accountability remains one of the, I'll call key requirements of a leader who wants to improve morale, build cohesiveness, and increase productivity. So some of you may be sitting out there thinking, really? It's supposed to do that? Well, yeah. So it's kind of like the word team. We screw that one up a lot. It's so pervasive that it can be misconstrued as simply a group of people working together, and we all know better. It's really much more than that, especially if we're working in a virtual world. The level of cooperation and integration required from each member on any team today, whether it's virtual or co-located, it's very much on a high plane. People are working independently, and some are as part of a work group. Either way, everybody's working toward a common goal. But if you expect to be a high-performance team, they have to hold themselves mutually accountable. And in case you missed that, let me restate it. The very essence of a team is that accountability is at the core, the very heart of the team's mission, its processes, and its goals. To talk about working together and then not devote time to the subject of accountability is really akin to missing the whole point in my book. We talked a wee bit about what accountability is, but let me tell you what it is not. Like the word team, it's also a subject that is often misunderstood. Too many people associate accountability with only discipline and punishment. Hello? How motivating is that? If that's how you perceive accountability, then we're really all headed for trouble. It's not about getting your finger slapped by the nun in grade school anymore. It's not about being called out and made to feel like you were below the bottom of the food chain. You know, a lot of people think that holding employees accountable was all about catching their mistakes and coming down on them. We often just associate accountability in the workplace with blame and guilt, if not downright criminal activity, I'm sorry to say. Who's accountable? Fess up. When what they're really saying is, whose head is going to roll here? Folks, accountability in the workplace isn't about nailing someone to the wall for screwing up. And we're going to talk a lot about this throughout the hour, but it's about having clearly defined mutual expectations between and among people. What is the person going to do? When are they going to do it? And how do you follow up and make it happen? If people fear accountability because punishment is someone else's end game, then no one is going to be willing to step up, speak out, or try something new. I think this is key. Innovation and risk-taking will be lost if you're not careful. People become skittish about taking initiatives to find solutions if they fear getting stepped on or squashed for simply trying. Savvy organizations realize that blaming people for events that have already happened does more harm than good. It tends to make people secretive. It makes people competitive with their coworkers. People end up looking out for number one more than striving for the success of the whole organization. It's really interesting, as I did, to go online and learn that in a lot of successfully accountable organizations, mistakes are actually celebrated as learning opportunities. The focus is shifted from finger pointing to jointly figuring out how things should be done differently in the future. Now, one team I encountered actually began each of its weekly team meetings with a celebration of the week's biggest screw-up. I'm serious. I read that and I'm like, are you kidding me? But the company says this technique not only effectively surfaced problems and got them solved, it virtually drove fear out of their workplace. Nowadays, organizations can be so afraid of lawsuits that they won't admit mistakes. That kind of excuse-making and blaming others cascades down and really permeates throughout the whole organization. But when a leader can stand before his or her employees and say, I made a mistake, and this is what we're going to do to fix it, boy, does that send a positive example of accountable behavior that employees won't be afraid to emulate. And if you manage accountability correctly, it can do four things. It can help people build critical skills. It can create a sense of individual responsibility. It can help people improve on their weaknesses. And it can position a team squarely on a path to success. So done right, accountability can be a highly positive experience. And in highly performing organizations, it provides opportunities to coach someone, counsel that person, and enable him or her to grow. And if you're a leader, accountability can give you the chance to develop your own skills, such as learning how to have difficult conversations about poor performance. And we're going to talk about that one at the end of the webinar here. So basically, one of the reasons we're even talking about accountability is that I want to show you that it can provide the chance for everyone, all of us, to improve upon our weaknesses and propel our businesses toward a place of prosperity. The wise professional chooses to be accountable. It's about building accountability into the culture so that it becomes a business tool. It can also be a really good roadmap for each of you to help keep you on track and see that your job satisfaction, not just your job performance, increases because you have learned to make accountability work for you. Now, the concept of accountability plays a huge role and keeping individuals as well as teams afloat. It's one of what I'm calling the keys to the kingdom. It allows the team to operate effectively and efficiency, and it's like trust. Mutual trust allows personal and business relationships to thrive. And the two concepts of accountability and trust really go hand in hand, along with something else, consistency. Consistency means that you are steady and reliable, and people know it. It's characterized by people with good work ethics and people you can always count on. You know who they are. Might be the person on your left or the person on your right, or maybe not. But either way, consistency builds trust, which leads to accountability. How hard is that? This is a great book by a husband and wife team, and they write that without trust, working virtually is virtually impossible. Think about that for a second. Trust is hard to do when you're working virtually, and we'll get there as well. Okay, so their book actually goes on to identify the link between accountability and something they call 3 types of trust that I found really interesting. The first is contractual trust. In other words, that's essentially due diligence. Are you doing what you say you are doing? This type of trust requires you to establish clear boundaries, manage as well as clearly communicate expectations, keep your word, and be consistent. Communication trust is about honesty and divulgence, admitting mistakes, giving honest feedback, sharing sensitive information with people. It's ultimately about finding the comfort zone, which encompasses the right balance between openness and company confidentiality. And the third type of trust is competency trust, which means respecting the skills and abilities of your teammates, as well as your own. It also leads to solid teamwork. It means you involve others instead of trying to do it all yourself. If one person falls behind on a task, others may also fall behind. You have to trust that everybody is holding up their end of the proverbial bargain. You can't force people to be accountable, but when the work environment is designed for accountability, it will flourish. Productivity in your office, your organization, is affected tremendously by the willingness of you and everybody else to buy into building quality relationships with each other. Whether you're a middle manager, a virtual worker, a business owner, or the leader, if a group is not working up to its potential, let me say this. Individual and peer accountability are necessary ingredients that can supercharge the team development and enthusiasm. So I'm guessing at least a couple of you are sitting out there thinking, oh, really? You don't know some of the people I work with. Good luck with that. To which I'll respond, come on, we can all do this. Any group where people depend upon one another to accomplish something will at some point do one of 2 things. They will either meet and greet, or they will try to avoid those emotions involved when it comes to accountability. But you know what? None of us really has a choice anymore. We can't let others control how we react or how we act sometimes. Wise leaders will recognize that they have to positively enable and encourage both individual and peer accountability throughout their organization. It's really about ownership. What's that old phrase, which I'm probably going to butcher? What people help build, they will tend to support. Probably should have Googled that one, but you get my drift. When individuals can claim a more active and significant role as part of something larger than themselves, they own more. And that means they're starting to feel accountable. And they're starting to accept responsibility. And they may even be on their way to embracing accountability. I was thinking about this last night, chatting with my neighbor. Their oldest child just got her driver's license. And mom and dad are debating whether to get her a car. And they are so far apart on how they want to teach her to be accountable and responsible. Everything from she should get grandma's old Jeep to she should get a new car. She should get a job and help pay for some insurance to know we'll pay for insurance. We trust her. And I quickly got away from that conversation as fast as I could, but I thought, really not any different than what we're talking about in the workplace. Teaching accountability isn't easy. But make no mistake, you and I and everybody sitting around you really has a dog in this race. We can either spend our time complaining about our challenges, blaming coworkers for a mishandled group project, or refusing to acknowledge that we might have had a teeny bit of responsibility for a missed deadline. Or we can suck it up, take ownership of both the good and the bad, and take a vow that whatever happened won't happen again. It really is that simple. When it comes to empowering teams and accountability, can you really hold a team accountable? There's been a good bit of research on that. And here's the statement that I ran across. Let me pull it up here. The concept of individual accountability is so strong in our organizational cultures that the notion of holding a whole team accountable for its collective outputs sometimes boggles corporate minds. Unquote. I'm not sure I get that one. To me, it's sorting out the contributions of an individual, and yeah, that can be a tricky task. We can't always tell what a single person's part in a process or product was. Where a team produces a whole piece of work, output is much easier to assess. And what should we care, after all, about what part each individual played in making it happen? For instance, and I was trying to do an analogy here, and I'm like, okay, if your dry cleaner ruins one of your suits or dresses, do you hunt down the worker who did the damage? No, you hold the business accountable, usually the manager, the owner, whoever's there that day, and you make them accountable for making the situation right. You don't care who made the mistake or even who will fix it, just as long as the problem is resolved. So it should be with teams. Truly empowered teams have the authority to carry out their responsibilities, as well as the accountability for collectively fixing things when they go wrong. But if you're the leader, you have to make it abundantly clear that they have that authority. Lastly, an organization's systems need to close the loop by connecting real consequences to a team's actions. I read that too often managers shield teams from the consequences of what they do. The managers are often the ones who field complaints from customers or run interference with other departments. But if the team is to be held accountable, then they must handle the results of their own actions together. This usually means putting teams in regular contact with customers and linking maybe even a portion of their compensation with their cumulative efforts. And that's a whole subject for another webinar, but let me at least toss that one out there. It also means the whole team is held accountable for the performance of each member. So in a team-based organization, coaching and correcting individual performance problems is as much a team responsibility as a management responsibility. You know, in our new virtual workplace course, Building Virtual Teams, we've said that the days of managing by walking around are nearly gone. In the new virtual workplace, it's not so much about the supervisor talking to employees, it's about getting virtual team members to talk to each other. And it's a little hard to walk around when you're not co-located. So that's the first step in fostering accountability. Do your people know and understand one another? And we're going to spend a good bit of time on this one. I won't go into it here, but the virtual place where people are scattered all over the globe, it's positively imperative that consistent and ongoing efforts are made to bring people together around what I call the virtual water cooler. You have to find ways for people to interact and get to know one another as individuals. You really need to know what makes them tick, what their likes and dislikes are, what motivates them and inspires them. When you start to understand someone, then you can relate better and have a sense of what they will contribute to the team. In other words, you can begin to figure out what I like to call, what is their accountability profile? And you don't get that until you start to be able to read someone. So it really does take us back to the trust issue. If we really know someone, then we can make a decision about the degree to which we can trust them to get the job done. Now, I'm not Pollyanna here. I'm not suggesting we live in a perfect world and everybody every day holds up 100% at his or her end of the bargain. No, absolutely not. A lot of times stuff just happens and things go awry. But I am here to tell you that we can all change our behaviors, and that the organization can change its behavior as well, so that accountability, being a positive force in your organization, stands more than just a fighting chance of actually happening. So if the first step is making sure that people know and understand one another, the second step is to foster accountability is setting guidelines. What's expected? What are the rules for this team? It's about clarity. It's always about clarity. Clarity creates commitment and leads to dependability. What did we say a minute ago? Dependability builds trust. And trust is the foundation upon which accountability sits. People trust one another to be reliable and to be willing to be held accountable. It's rather simple, actually. If you say you're going to do something, do it. So accountability always starts at the individual level. So break down department level or team level goals into individual goals. What are the expected outcomes? Deadlines. As I was kind of going over my notes for this at home early this morning, took my big green pen and made a mark here and said, to me, this is the big takeaway I hope you leave here with. And that is that expectations must be clear, crystal clear, in fact. If expectations are fuzzy or confusing in any way, your team can quickly break down, and very important details can fall between the cracks. Or another way of putting it, what is it that seems to drive most people the most crazy about accountability? It is not, in my mind, the mere act of being held responsible. That's not it. What drives most of us nuts is someone not being clear as to what you're being held accountable for. If you don't understand that, that makes the whole process absolutely miserable. And you know what else isn't much fun? It's no fun to be held accountable when there are sudden surprises or when specifics keep shifting from the other end. Few of us are crazy about surprises. We can all deal with change pretty much, but don't spring it on us. And if you have to spring it on us, take the time to lay out very, very quickly anything else that's changed. Okay, time out. Just so you know, I do understand that sometimes change comes down from the mountaintop and no one's going to ask you if it's okay. Not going to happen. So we have to deal with it. And we need to be smart enough to say, okay, I'll deal, but I have some questions. Folks, I'm here to tell you, when you are accountable for something, you should ask every question you can think of to make sure you're totally understanding what just changed here. And sometimes maybe you were just on vacation, or you had Friday off, or you missed a meeting. And that's how change gets to you. Same things apply. What are some questions to ask? Well, maybe, am I now accountable for something new? If someone else is someone else now accountable for something that used to belong to me? And are you going to give me the resources I might need now that things have changed? Those are all legitimate questions. As a team member, you need to think about them. And if you're the team lead, you need to anticipate them, get ahead of them, so you can provide answers to people as they're seeking them. So if change suddenly emerges, and it will, and if it comes down on a tablet past some darn burning bush, well, when you and Moses get to the bottom of the hill, deliver the news with some compassion and respect. You're already a threat when you're walking in telling someone that things are about to go upside down. If anything is mandated, fine. Just take the time to make sure that this little gift is understood and that people can ask questions about specifics. as well as understand where and when there's any flexibility involved. That is the foundation of accountability and goes right back to my 3 favorite words: clarity, clarity, and clarity. So, okay, let's have a sidebar for a second. Here's another piece of advice. Be aware of what's called bias toward accountability by proximity. The tendency to manage accountability with those who are closest to us and less so with those who are further away. If you're leading or working on a virtual team, then establish regular alignment meetings in addition to standard meetings. Take a virtual timeout. And sometimes you can do this offline and one-on-one and say, hey, what's working and what's not? Find out if they have a need for additional resources. See if you can figure out if someone hung up anywhere. They're usually closed, by the way. It's more than what needs to be done. It's making sure the how-to pieces are in place. So what have we learned? Okay. Accountability is about getting things done and following through. Establishing guidelines on the front end is absolutely a must. But setting guidelines becomes even more important if there's a virtual component to it. If people are working off-site. Why? Because the normal day-to-day interactions in other environments are elusive. Conduct regular reporting on tasks. Check results, yes, but figure out how to create a feedback loop. And I wish I'd put this on the screen. A feedback loop, but we'll talk about it in a moment. Don't forget your share points and the importance of a shared drive. Or find some other way to help people stay informed and make it easy to share information. Maybe it's minutes. Maybe it's just a little blog you get going. At the end of the day, it's about the E word, engagement. If people can't get to information they need, well, what? They become less interested in working hard and making their contributions. It's easy to say, well, no one bothered to tell me. And for many of us who are visual learners, or show me, so to heck with it. They didn't care, why should I care? Not a great recipe for Easter cake. So what are we talking about now? Actually, I need to go back a slide. I got ahead of myself. All right, here we go. The first step is to make sure everyone is interested in getting to the same destination. Think about that for a minute. Is that not like the most obvious statement on the planet? It's not unlike a football coach. Making sure that all the players are accepting of those hot two-a-days in July and August because they all want to beat Central Catholic High School next Friday night. That seems pretty easy to do. The carrot or the brass ring are pretty darn obvious to those kids, and everybody wants to be part of that action, and they're going to beat Catholic High no matter what. If people in the workplace share a vision of where they want to go and have a motivating reason why, then they are much more likely to invest themselves completely in the group's success. Another way of saying is we have to find a way to make it personal. Each person has to have a personal connection to the project and to the vision. People have to care. If you care, hello, you're much more likely to hold yourself accountable for your own successes and the team's success. If you don't believe me, look at sports teams. The players whom we most admire many times and the coaches whom we most admire many times always foster an environment where winning a game is a team achievement. Even on those college and professional sports teams where egos can be enormous, how many times do players and coaches alike extol the virtues of today's win having been a team effort? Each person gives his or her best so that the team racks up the most points and wins the game. Somewhere along this path arises the understanding that we all have influence. We can all influence the team and the people who comprise it. It's remembering that none of us is as smart as all of us. So we hold ourselves accountable and we hold others accountable. And if you do it right, then we accept that to some extent we are our brother's keeper. We should seek to influence other people's contributions and enjoy the satisfaction that comes from helping others achieve their goals and team goals. So what are we talking about? It's communication skills. If you're wondering if I'm getting off track and asking what that has to do with accountability, I would suggest that it has everything to do with accountability. In order to embrace accountability, you have to speak up. Whether it's when you're working one-on-one with your boss or whether you're part of a team, communication is not a one-way street. You can't just sit there like a big funnel waiting for people to pour stuff into you. It doesn't work that way. Thanks to technology, we have so many ways to communicate. Video conferences, to email, to webinars, to text messaging, to Twittering. I don't think I've ever tweeted anything about teamwork, but there's always a first. We have iPhones and Androids, and I've even heard of something new and radical. It's called a telephone. You can just pick it up. And although getting people used to some of this stuff isn't easy, it can be habit forming rather quickly. So we have the tools that are supposed to bring us together, but they don't always. Why? Well, research tends to show that people still like meaningful discussions in face-to-face settings that provide relevant feedback on performance. I think sometimes we hide behind devices and technology. But here's one for you. Don't confuse the act of communication with the message. The amount and type of communication between people may be completely ineffective if the quality of that interaction is lacking. So let's take a look at what you need to do to install, nurture, and inspire a culture of accountability. We're getting to the how-to part of this. I'm looking at the time. I'm going to have to speed it up, but we'll get there. It's a whole series of things, some of which we've deliberately touched on already, and now some of this will be a repeat. Communicate the big picture. Spend some time talking individually with team members about his or her project or his or her part of the project and how it affects the vision and mission of the enterprise. If you do that, chances are that people can make wiser decisions from the concept of the big picture. You know, we talk a lot about executives seeing things from 30,000 feet. Well, especially in a large organization and even a large team, sometimes things get cloudy. You know, they're working in their little cubicle or their little part of the world and their piece of the puzzle. And sometimes you got to remind them, what's the big picture? Where are we all headed? What are we striving for? Have an upfront agreement. Here we call it a pact, ongoing conversation, and mutual understanding. It alleviates doubt about who's supposed to do what. And my favorite word, it clarifies expectations. Take time to explore, ask questions, and investigate options about how you will communicate on this team, including what to do when someone doesn't know something. Why did I even bring that up? Well, because mistakes can often be traced to people not speaking up about something they didn't understand. Not all of us, you know, I don't know why, it's pretty easy for me to, you know, use that really magical business word, huh? Or what do you mean? Or would you say that again? But a lot of people, to save face, they continue on with the task and do it incorrectly or not at all, or they avoid it because they fear they will fail. A lot of this fear, I guess, goes back to childhood. We assume it's bad to not know something, and the mistakes will be punished. That's stuck with a lot of us since we were kids. So, guys, spell it out up front. It's okay not to know something, but it's not okay to not ask for clarification. Do you see the potential power of having this kind of honesty and directness in your communications? Do you see the possibility for innovation and creativity when people are free to try, to make mistakes, own up to them, and then admit if they don't know something? The world usually will not end. So set challenging but attainable expectations. You know, you got to make sure they're attainable. Being stretched is great. Stretch goals can bring out the best in all of us, allow us to expand our comfort zones. But being stretched too far only creates anxiety. So it's about finding balance. And you know what comes to mind here? The word confidence. If people feel confident that they can do something, especially if it's something they've never done before, then accountability isn't such an issue. But make sure people have the resources they need if we think we can do something, then it's not so hateful to be held accountable as long as we think, hey, you know what? I just might be able to pull this off. And when they do, that's a great feeling. So that's setting an expectation of evaluation and accept, and the expectation of evaluation and success. No one expects to stay under the radar. In fact, people seek feedback, and this is key. They seek feedback because they know it's only intended to improve the process and add to their knowledge, provided you're in the right kind of organization. Use multiple forms of it. Don't wait too late to ask for feedback. Get it along the way. A great way to foster accountability is to have people set SMART goals. And every time I'm doing any kind of webinar and someone starts talking about SMART goals, I want to cringe, because we started talking about SMART goals 25 years ago. So I know you know what they are. The secret here is to set them for yourselves. It's finding a way for people to measure their own productivity and track their own achievements. You don't have to be particularly public, but I would encourage you people to do it. But there's a danger. Anyone know what that is? Well, it's the failure to double check that everyone is working towards the same outcome. SMART goals are one thing, but you don't need a team of 11 people with their SMART goals if they're not all going in the same direction. So make sure that people are focused on the same desired result. So do an outcome check. Do that first, then set SMART goals. With my apologies to those of you in the aerospace industry, this business of focusing on coaching, not managing, isn't rocket science. But when it comes to fostering accountability, it's more like behavioral science. Intimidation seldom works, but encouragement and support do. People don't mind being held accountable when they know they have supervisors and colleagues who want them to succeed. Just as customers are more prone to buy from people they like, employees will typically work harder for a boss whom they respect more than they fear. It's one of those things that's left over from childhood. Well, most of us, well, maybe not the person sitting next to you, but most of us like to please. It's human nature. And coaching is also the art of showing, not just telling. So if you're the supervisor, keep a lookout for someone who demonstrates that he or she isn't quite sure about something. If you're that employee who does have concerns or questions, let's go back to the previous bit of advice. If you have a question, ask. Sometimes a leader's job is to resolve problems. If you're leading a team, learn to value your assets, people on the team. When something comes up, make it a group effort sometimes to find solutions. Remind people of who brings what to the table, and ask different people to supply different pieces of information, or maybe do different pieces of research. And you'd be surprised how many times a little victory on a side matter can build unity. People like to fix things, and it can be a real morale booster. Reinforce the importance of what everyone brings to the table. It's a sneaky way of revisiting the group mission and reminding everybody that they do share a common vision. So, transparent, honest communications enable people to provide feedback about their performance. No one benefits when people won't speak up, but you have to make it safe. If you are leading a team, then you have to say it's okay for people to speak their mind and take issue with the status quo. Now, people also need to have some skills for disagreeing without being disagreeable. And anybody who knows me knows that's a favorite topic of mine. And for knowing how to influence and yet not inflame. But we'll save that topic for a future webinar. That could be fun. Maybe we'll just call it workplace etiquette or something like that. Also, if you're not a manager, but what do you do if you need something to succeed? Speak up. Hold your manager accountable to support you and help you succeed. Hey, accountability is a two-way street. Okay, help people prioritize. Now we're kind of getting in the leadership piece of this. In today's world, employees struggle to balance tasks and goals. It's easy to become overwhelmed, unable to complete tasks on time. Sometimes people just need help prioritizing. I've been there. I'm sure we all have. It's like, oh my God, so many things going on here. What, Mr. Boss or Ms. Boss, what do you want me to focus on first? It helps people get organized. There again, they're probably not asking you. So people struggle to be accountable when roles and processes are ambiguous. So removing as much confusion as possible about who is doing what and in what order, that's an important step, an important leadership step. A lot of problems and assignments have multiple right answers. What do? Well, you give people the freedom and control they need to make decisions. You cannot micromanage every step. It just makes people feel like they can't breathe without someone analyzing every breath. The first solution your teams and direct reports come up with is, according to research, probably is pretty good. So you can improve upon them. You don't always have to insert your own. Chances are the team is getting there. Support is the key. Can't say this enough. Be sure people have the resources and knowledge and assistance they need. With this kind of an approach, team members will increase their skills, confidence, and what else? Ownership. Monitoring people's progress will help motivate them to be more productive and accountable. It's only natural when we know someone is watching our progress that we will try to perform to our best abilities. But we touched earlier on, there's a good way, a right way of watching people and a wrong way. But do like a coach and counselor, not as a tyrant. Along with monitoring process, it's equally important to share progress reports with them so they may learn what areas need more attention and what areas they're excelling in. Take the time to make sure people have what they need to get their jobs done. And word of advice, watch your tone. Many people are so not affected by the tone of other people's voices, it boggles me. I'm one of these people that's overly sensitive to it. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was an only child. Maybe because I have a screw loose or two. But the way in which people ask me to do something can totally set the tone for how eager I am to do it. And I am so just going to leave it there. All right. Recognize that there are often roadblocks. What do I mean by that? Don't put someone in charge of manipulating a lot of data if they really don't have good Excel skills. Yeah, of course, we learn by doing, and most of us get comfortable with new software simply by using it. That's certainly my case, and sometimes being forced to use it. But be careful here. If there's a complex project and a person has only rudimentary skills in a key area, and you need a complicated report by Friday, well, you're just setting the person up for failure and frustration. Accountability is the least of their problems. You simply have got to make sure that the right people get the right assignments. Another way of saying, have the right people in the right seats on the proverbial bus. Provide incentives for productive activity in addition to end results. That's kind of a mouthful, and what does it mean? Well, we're living in a results-driven world. I get that. And I understand those who like to say it doesn't matter how many hours someone puts in, and it doesn't count that you're working hard. Well, it does. I'm sorry. Sure, the results have to be there. But, there's nothing wrong with recognizing effort as well as accomplishment. Many times the very nature of a project is such that any tangible results that you can really, really measure are weeks or months down the path. So can anyone honestly tell me that thanking people and recognizing little milestones along the way is wrong? I don't think so. Being accountable for the end result is fine. Excuse me. But so is being appreciated for achievements along the way. How many times have we all been called into a meeting or just headed for a regularly scheduled meeting, weekly get-together, where if you think about it, the only thing that gets done is to go down a list of housekeeping items. Anyone been a participant in those? I think I hear some head shaking. How much of that could have just been handled in an email? How about if we use those status meetings to really call out those milestones and credit people for their small steps that are really making a difference in helping everyone get to the end? You don't want to play favorites. And you don't want to act like one of those parents who overdoes it by overpraising children for finishing their mashed potatoes. But you know what I mean. It's really important that people who are contributing and who are making great progress be recognized for it. If you do it correctly, you can make some of the milestones into team milestones. For instance, I want to thank Jeremy and Matt and Phyllis for getting the information we needed from the customer. We're taking a look at some different financing alternatives. All of that contributes to the whole team's accountability for being task-focused. One more thing, back to the individual. Again, I'll admit that you have to be judicious with praise, but at the end of the day, you hear praise is terrific, and to be praised in front of others is awesome. It can also subconsciously raise the expectations bar, and people will want to be more engaged. Okay, here's a toughie. Commit to doing something about poor performers. There's a lot of research and empirical evidence out there that holding on to inadequate performers does more damage to a team and to an organization than more than anything else. Many of us don't want to hear that, I know, and I had a hard time that with myself many years ago. But you know what? I finally figured it out. It wasn't a focus on the offender that did it. It was the day I realized how unfair it is to good employees to tolerate substandard performance from others. It's not right, and it can drag an organization or a team right down the drain. People not carrying their own weight isn't acceptable. So I don't want to belabor the point, but just two thoughts. Good people on a team are much more willing to be held accountable when they see that poor performers are confronted for their less than stellar contributions. You can read between the lines there. But do make sure you're having those critical conversations offline. It doesn't do anybody any good to be criticized in front of the whole team. The whole team is watching, knowing if it went on, but you don't do it there. And then secondly, if you've exhausted every avenue you know to get this person on track, then perhaps it's time to weed the garden. And if it's time, trust me, you'll know. Then you may do more for the team than absolutely anything else you can think of. Carrying dead weight is a burden on everybody. If your team has that on its back, you need to lighten their load. Make sure that you are modeling accountable behaviors. If you're the manager, displaying personal accountability yourself will help build a culture of accountability in your organization. Your employees and others will watch as you create an acceptance and understanding of accountability. It's probably too simplistic to say, monkey see, monkey do. But others are more likely to follow your actions simply by your lead. We are all so transparent. Knowing that personal accountability is something that even management is responsible for will help employees feel balanced and more bonded to things. It's about shared responsibility. People who believe they're all in the same boat will all tend to row together. So, for once in my life, I actually finished a little bit ahead of time, and we have time for some questions. So, back to, while Sue's unmuting everybody, back to the statement we said earlier. Accountability is doing the right thing consistently, day in and day out, in tasks and relationship interactions to fulfill or future the mission of the organization. Anybody want to comment or share anything, provide something that maybe I left out? The mics are open, so step on up. Anyone?
This is Avis. Can I say something?
Avis, you can always say something, and if you didn't, we'd be sorely hurt. So go on.
The first thing is on some of your slides, I've written true. One I said true, and one I said amen. Just to show how right you are. The one thought that occurred to me as you were going through all this is a lot of this. I think we talked about when we were facilitating the NMA advanced project management workshops 30 years ago. So what goes around comes around. But the one thing I did want to say was, for those of you who know me, you know that for the past 35 years, most of my participation has been with volunteer organizations. And I wanted to say in volunteer organizations, it is imperative that you have a common destination. In volunteer organizations, a lot of people join it because they're passionate about the project or the program, but it is often very, very difficult to get people working on a volunteer team to agree on what the common destination is. So in volunteer organizations, the common destination is imperative. And I'm done.
But right on target as always. Thank you, Avis. Anyone else?
Steve?
Yeah.
On the virtual team thing, you mentioned accountability profile. Is that like a brief biography to get people to know each other better?
No, it's something I made up kind of as I was going along. What I was trying to say was, everybody on your team, there's over their head in a little balloon is an accountability profile, probably based upon their knowledge, their experience, their temperaments, their talents, upbringing, education. In other words, most of you can look around. A lot of you today are in a group setting, and you can kind of look around the room and kind of go, he's accountable, she's accountable. Boy, she's really accountable. Not sure about this one. And what I mean by that is we all carry around an accountability profile that others see or think they see.
So I have a question. If you're an individual contributor and you have a member of leadership within your organization that consistently does not hold himself or his staff accountable, and you can see how that impacts the entire organization, is there anything you can do to kind of point them in the right direction, start changing that behavior?
I think I'm going to ask everybody in the group to think about it, because chances are some of you will have a better answer than I. But while you're assembling your thoughts, I'll take a stab. That's a toughie. It's never easy to go to your boss and tell them they're not doing it right. So a lot of that it's back to one of my words, tone. I think if you can put together, and I'd have it in writing, at least in front of you, don't necessarily have to hand it to them, but basically saying, some of us have been talking, and there's some things that would help us move forward or get to the goal quicker. There are some things that maybe you can do to help. May I share them with you? And kind of see if you can get in the door that way. Because, it's not exactly a brilliant move to walk into the leader's office and say, you are lacking in some competencies, and I'd like to outline 14 of them. That's not the way to go. So I think you have to soft soap it a little bit. But I think it needs to be put in context of how the whole group effort would be improved were the leader to do this, that, or the other. Now, that's a better answer than I did.
This is Avis again. I know I was going to shut up, but in my years of working in industry, managers came to expect that if I rapped on the door and asked, could you spare me a moment, they knew that I was going to bring up an issue that affected the whole team, including the leaders.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. You need to present it in such a way that they recognize that the whole group needs to work together, and they need to lead it.
Yeah, and you can even phrase it as sir or madam. Our whole team is kind of struggling. I think you can help by whatever by is.
Hey, this is Mariah. I'm sorry.
Hi, Myra.
No, I was going to say, this is Mariah from Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan. And I just want to get clarity, on that question. The person that asked the question, were you saying as an individual contributor and maybe you have a peer or a leader that's a part of the project group and they need to hold their team accountable that's a part of that project group? Or were you saying you talking to your leader?
It's a leader within our group.
Okay.
We have multiple senior managers, and so you will see pretty drastically how the accountability is at a different level with a particular leader. So I'm just wondering ways that we can kind of get that one and his team back on the same playing field as the other.
Okay, so I want to seek clarity because I was going to suggest, so one of the big things that we do here, part of our company, are projects, you know, and continuous improvement plans and things like that. And I'm a leader. And on that team, you may have other leaders and you may have individual contributors where we're all trying to meet one particular goal. So one of the things that we incorporated in my most recent project group is a technique where we are calling people in rather than calling them out. So when you're dealing with a leader such as this one or any type of leader, you always want to kind of build that trust, that communication. And then I think we kind of mentioned it in the presentation, having that candor or safe environment where that person can feel like you're, you know, no one is calling them out, but we're more so calling them in so that we can all be on the same page. So in my experience, sometimes it requires one-on-one, face-to-face over coffee, or sometimes it requires an email just to make sure everything is clear and simple. But I mean, the one thing that I would say, you know, by being in that situation in my role previously is that, you know, you always just want the person to feel like, you know, hey, we're on the same page. We're both trying to get to the same goal. I'm here to support in any way that I can. And then kind of speaking to what the concern is. So then that way you're calling them in versus calling them out. I hope that helps.
It does, thank you.
You need to drop me a note. I want to know exactly with whom I'm chatting. You are excellent. You want to do this afternoon's webinar?
No, I'll actually be busy though.
Do you do webinars? Because you've got, I like how you present yourself. I bet you could do a dynamite webinar. So if anyone's sitting around the table with her, sneak me her name and contact information. Okay, we got a minute or two maybe to stay within the time frame. Questions, comments, anyone?
Steve, what would be your non-negotiables when it comes to aligning a team to get to the, the same destination?
My non-negotiables. Wow. Parameters and the fact that people understand them. Communication methods. How and when are we going to make sure everybody is communicated with? And probably then finding time, and there again depends on whether it's virtual or co-located or some combo, finding ways to make sure that I get the team together and they can kind of talk about business offline, online, over coffee, over pizza. That's really based on my own participation in teams. I don't like things sprung on me. I like clarity, and I want teamwork should be fun. It should be an enjoyable experience. Moving an organization, moving a project, moving a process from where it is to a better place. That's what you're working on, hopefully, in most cases. So those would be my non-negotiables.
All right, thank you.
And remind, I'm not a subject matter expert here, so just based on a few years of work under my belt. All right, we got time for one more. Anybody? Okay.
You've had lots of experience.
Yeah, that we have, and teaming and leadership and accountability. It's a moving target. It always changes. So thank you for hanging in, everybody. I appreciate your attendance today. Sue, Robin, and I all do. They're working behind the scenes here. Tomorrow is Good Friday. So let me wish all of you a wonderful Easter weekend. And if you need something fun to do, get a group of adults together, buy a Pause Easter egg kit, and take everyone back to their childhood. I did a cocktail party many years ago on that weekend, and adults who didn't have kids were there making Easter eggs, and everybody had a ball. None of us had done it in 20, 30 years. So have a lovely weekend and a safe weekend. There's going to be some bad weather in places around the country, so keep an eye on that, and we'll see you next time. Take care.